Hi, I'm John Hovanesian, and we're having today a conversation by remote video with Jim Mazzo, who is going to talk with me about the future of eye care as we see ourselves emerge from the COVID epidemic. Jim Mazzo, thanks for joining me today.
John, thank you very much. You've never looked better, John.
And I very much like the beard. Um, Jim, you've had just about as much experience as anybody in eye care, and by that I don't mean you're old. I mean that you've done it all. Jim is global president for Carl Zeiss Meditech's strategic business unit for ophthalmic devices. And that includes the diagnostics we're all familiar with, as well as all of their surgical ophthalmology business and refractive lasers. Jim started his career with 22 years at Allergan, where he rose to leading the North American and European business. And then he spent 11 years as originally the founding chairman and then president of AMO, including its transition to Abbott. He's served small companies as well in leadership. He worked for AcuFocus as their CEO before heading to Zeiss, where he is now, and where he is soon to retire. Congratulations on your retirement from Zeiss, but I understand this is not your retirement.
No, well, again, John, thanks very much. It's an honor to talk to a good friend and somebody I really admire in our industry. This is actually just a retirement from Zeiss. This is my 40th year in the industry. I absolutely love, as you know, what I do. I'm very fortunate. The industry's been great to me. You, as practitioners, have been someone I've always admired what you do every day. So all I'm going to be doing is transitioning away from Zeiss. I'm going to stay on till the end of September, help assist Ewan and work with Lidwin and the team. And then I'll continue to work with the companies that I have, like Neurotech and Avellino, and add a couple others and stay involved in the associations on the board of ASCRS. So for anybody that was hoping they would see less of me are going to be vastly disappointed because they'll see my ugly mug still continuing in our industry.
So, Jim, you have set records at Zeiss, as you did with companies before, in success. At Zeiss, I think it's fair to say that you reformed the company around a focus on customers, and that led to a whole new way of succeeding, of selling. And you have transitioned the business to one that is going to be more digital in the future. So, with your understanding of both the company side and the customer, the physician practice, look ahead for us and tell us if you can, to start with, what do you see in the future after we arise out of this epidemic?
Well, first off, let me just say thank you for saying that I would tell you, as you know, I have been very lucky in recruiting a new team and adding to the team. So the likes of the Andy Changs and the Angelos and the Dirks deserve all the credit. I just was able to bring them on board. So thank you for that. I would say that I'm equating to what's going to happen in the practices as to what happened to the travel industry under the travesty of 9/11, in that it just transformed how we travel. And I think now it's going to transform on how you see patients, how we interact with doctors. I think it's going to be much more information before you walk in. I don't think the casual walk-in visit, the bringing mom and dad into the room, all that is going to happen. I think even the handing a pen to your patient to fill out their form is gone. And sometimes I think it actually, when you transform because of a catastrophe or of an issue, you actually make things better. So I actually think your flow of your practices might be better. Because why should we be having people fill out things on a pen? Today, the digital age is there. So I would say that I actually think the flow of your patients will be different in your offices. I think you don't need to see. And I'll add one other comment. Prior to COVID, I said that one of the biggest issues we were facing is more patients, less doctors. I said that before COVID. And that was going to be traumatic for you and your practices and for our industry. So it was going to happen anyway. You couldn't see the same amount of people. You couldn't have your office be as encumbered with non-productivity type of patients. So this was going to happen. COVID is accelerating it, John.
So I think it's a very interesting collision that you're talking about between the demand and the supply of doctors and the inefficiency of the way we used to deliver care. When I think back, and I'm old enough to remember life well before EHR systems, electronic health records came around about 10 years ago, when my practice really fully embraced it, began using it for clinic visits. And I think I could speak for most doctors in saying that they have not made us more efficient. They've created a lot of benefits, but they've not made us more efficient. As we look ahead toward becoming more digital, how do we find solutions that actually make us more efficient, that allow us to do more with less time?
Well, you're being very humble because you're one of the leaders in this area and what you've done at your practice as well as with your system. So you're actually a visionary in what you've done prior to this. And I can easily go on record with that because you've been talking about that prior to the COVID. Again, it goes back to my point. I think necessity is going to drive this. If the practices are not set up to be able to self-diagnose away from the office, they're going to falter and fail. So this is now from moving from a nice to have to a need to have. And I think these practices are going to have to educate themselves. One of the most difficult things we have in lives as we get older is to break habits that got us to be where we are. We've been successful and we sit there and go, well, why change? If I've been successful, why do I have to adapt? Well, I think success is now going to be because you better adapt. And if you don't adapt to this digital workplace, I don't care how you've gotten there, that's going to change. And again, it is going to be a requirement, not a nice to have anymore. It's going to be a need to have. You're going to also need to capture that data. I said something before this COVID exercise. I said, he or she who owns the data will win. And so that predictive analysis that you can get from the data will make you a better physician. And so I think the stalwarts that say, I'm sorry, I'm not adapting, will be on the beaches in the Bahamas because they will not be practicing.
And that, you say that like it's a bad thing.
Well, it all depends how much money they have to go onto the beach of the Bahamas. That's the big question.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that as well in a moment. But so it's interesting when you talk about the data, because previously the data that we collected was, the data that came from instrumentation like OCTs and visual field machines and, optical biometers. Are those machines going to become less important and others become more important in the future? Do you see the sales of those types of machines for companies like Zeiss changing in the future?
Well, let's talk about the first question. It is incumbent upon us as industry now to ensure that the equipment you utilize has the data capabilities to start when the patient is diagnosed to treatment. For you not to have that information right there in your microscope is really our problem, not yours. So when you diagnose a patient, that data should be easily transformed into your digital microscope so that when you're doing the surgery, it's there, looking through your oculars, or even now, as you know, what we can do with the 3D screens. So we have to do that. Now, selfishly, I will tell you, I think we at Zeiss have been doing that. We're not great at it yet, but with Veracity and with Forum, with EQ Workplace, we were starting to understand. And now we're going to have to be more aggressive in that. So it is going to be critical for us as manufacturers to ensure that you have that data access. Because I will tell you, if we don't do it at Zeiss, somebody else is going to do it. And so I know we're putting a lot of effort to it before. We're going to accentuate it. And, Ewan, who is coming over to take my place, actually has that digital background. So it's a perfect handover to Ewan, who understands how to do this.
I want to talk a little bit about telemedicine and its role here. And this is a tough one to figure out because because we can't see routine patients in the office because of the shutdown, we're trying to do our best with telemedicine. But we're fairly focused on what we see with the microscope and what we see with the OCT. Do you see, and do companies like Zeiss and others see the future of doing remote monitoring of patients as important? And do you see on the horizon instruments that are going to capture an OCT or a retinal exam that a patient could own at home?
Most definitely. And you know what I feel good about is that I was saying this along with my team at Angelo Rego and Andy Chang and Aaron Powers. We were saying this pre-COVID. So it's not like, oh, I'm jumping on the bandwagon now and I'm the smartest guy on the bear. We were saying this before. Again, goes back to what I said earlier. More patients, less doctors. It was going to happen no matter what. You cannot see every patient as they walk in. And in fact, it makes you more productive if you're able to see Mrs. Jones via this remote. So at the end of the day, at 7 o'clock at night, when you're done with your practice, you get on the computer and Mrs. Jones, OCT comes up. You can send her a text and say, listen, don't need to come in next month. Thanks. We'll see you in a month. I mean, that's productivity. Plus, as we're getting older, we're not as accessible. I mean, I have Kelly's parents are still with us. So lucky. But they're now in a nursing home. They don't have the same access. I don't want my father-in-law driving. So, but why should they be driving to meet with you when you could have easily identified and told her, listen, Nancy, you're looking good. You don't need to come in. Or guess what? Maybe even better. No, Nancy, we need you in now versus she waited a month for her next visit. So I think this is proactive measures to be able to manage patients accordingly. And I also will say something too, which is great for our healthcare systems. It's going to drive costs down. And we need to drive costs down across all healthcare because that's a pandemic there, the healthcare costs. We can't afford to continue to operate the way we've been operating. So this crisis is actually going to accelerate something that needed to be done.